to delve into this important topic. But before we begin, let's provide you with a quick update on the recent developments. Now, there are reports that suggest that the Law Commission might be looking at lowering the age of consent to 16. Now, this topic has sparked numerous discussions, arguments and counter-arguments concerning what is the right age of consent. It's important to note that the minimum age of consent for sexual intercourse was raised from 16 to 18 years in November 2012 when the law came into effect. Now, originally, the age of consent in India was 16 years, but it was subsequently increased to 18 years in 2013 with the passage of the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012 to align with the Act's provisions. Now, of course, in fact, we'll dive right into the debate. But before that, Nancy and I will just quickly, in fact, discuss the development which has come. It appears, Nancy, that the Law Commission, in fact, is looking into lowering the age of consent from 18 to 16. Do you think that, this is a good idea?
Before we get into whether it is a good idea or a bad idea, I think we really need to understand what is the purpose of this, lowering the age of consent. How is it going to help? Is it not going to differ with, protecting the children from child marriage, protecting teenagers from sexual prevention of act? Because lowering the age will be, you are giving a teenager the power that, and you are giving the teenager the position that, see, you are now an adult, you are completely capable of making what is the decision, what is right for you, what is wrong for you. I feel like that, if you lower the age of consent to 16, we are talking about consent, we are talking about a 16-year-old teenager indulging into relationship, sexual relationship, physical relationship. But are they capable enough of making that right decision? Because consent is a grey concept. You have to understand that first. Consent is for, and at an age when you are just 16 or when you are, 13, whatever it is, I mean, it's important to understand that consent can be manipulated, consent can be crafted as well. So that aspect still needs to be ironed out. There are a lot of loopholes, there are a lot of details that still needs to be ironed out.
Right.
But it will be an interesting, aspects to look into it, and an interesting debate around it is, I think, what is important.
What you say is consent can be manipulated. That's a very important statement out there. Let's dive into this debate. Joining us is Kasturi Shankar, actress, activist and lawyer. And we're also joined by, in fact, Khushbu Jain, who is an advocate from Supreme Court. Thank you very much for being here, Ms. Khushbu. And of course, Ms. Kasturi, thank you very much for your time. Right. I'll begin by asking you, Ms. Kasturi, what's your view on the age of consent debate? Do you think it should be lowered to 16?
It's not, I speak for a lot of people in my, we have a lawyers WhatsApp group, and I speak for a lot of them when I say, yes, I think most of us in the legal fraternity are definitely favoring a little lowering of the age. Most of us are tending towards 17 as the magic number, because 17 is when usually girl children have at least finished 10th grade, and one supposes that they have at least commensurate education to consent, to have a little bit of a maturity. I think it's incredible how much maturity a person can get between 16 and 17. But on the whole, yes, I do think lowering of the age is necessary, as is making the distinction between the age of consent and the age of marriage. We're not talking about marriage here, but as the Bombay High Court rightly observed, we have to definitely be cognizant. We have to be respectful of the changes that are happening in society, the ground reality that's happening in society. And the fact is that a lot of adolescents are indulging in sexual acts. This is not about rape. See, today, a minor is incapable of consent, right? So any girl under the age of 18 who indulges in sexual activity can tomorrow, we have seen cases where they have been in a relationship for years, for months together, and then something happens, they fight, and these are two kids. These are two minor children. There is a boy and a girl, and they fight, and then the girl goes and says, he raped me, because it's rape. It's a very Toxo has a lot of presumption of guilt that needs to be looked into carefully. So it's not just age of consent. In fact, for my personal view, is that age of consent should be looked into as one of the factors and may be taken with exceptions, may be taken with a degree of flexibility depending on the case itself. 70% of the cases that come to the court under POCSO now are cases of romantic relationships, which are filed by disgruntled parents. And really, it doesn't reflect reality. So, not just lowering of the age of consent, also a degree of flexibility in taking age as consent, age as the one factor. There are cases where the parent who has filed the case, or the person of knowledge, that's all you need, who the person in a place of care who has filed a case, a POCSO case. There are known cases where they have a history. They have a history, they have an antagonism, they have a history of hostility towards the accused. And then the victim, you don't have to prove anything. You just have to come into court, and sometimes everything is in camera. You cry, and the victim is 17 years and 8 months old when they file the POCSO case. These kind of abuses, I think these kind of frivolous cases will go down, and the burden on the court on trying such cases will also go down. So yeah, I definitely think lowering of, first of all, making a distinction between the age of consent and age of marriage is very important.
Right. Well, before I come to you, Ms. Jain, I'd also take this opportunity to welcome Rekha Agarwal, who is a social activist and senior advocate, Supreme Court. Welcome, Ms. Agarwal. I'll quickly go to you, Ms. Jain. Here, the question also is that there is an argument also put forth by Ms. Shankar that the POCSO Act is used as a tool to silence consensual relationships. As a lawyer, have you personally ever come across any such case or are aware of any such case?
I think that, this new trend that has come in, as the earlier speaker spoke about, it is in fact a very alarming situation that may happen. But one cannot be, there is no extent to which one can be cautious, in such kind of matters. I have come across cases, definitely have come across cases where I have felt that the law has been probably misused to some extent. So I think that one has to take everything with a very big pinch of salt. We cannot go, gung-ho about the fact that whether the age of consent has to be lowered or whether it has to be increased. Each case has to be taken on its own merit. The facts of each case will define, whether the law is correct or not, and whether the law has been applied properly. So I think that in the present situation, when there is going to be an amendment, we really cannot go gung-ho about it, that whether this is right or wrong. My experience at the bar, that is almost now about 36 years, I have seen that a law, there's always a flip side to everything that takes place. Law is not just what is written on the piece of paper. Law is very flexible. It is very fluid. A section may just define that the age of consent is this, or sexual intercourse by a boy with a girl, without her consent will amount to rape. It will amount to statutory rape. But now, what is the age of consent? How much aware is the boy as well as the girl of what kind of activity that they're indulging in? What are the facts and circumstances in which the physical activity was taking place between both the parties? Whether there was any, inducement, whether the girl had been enticed by the boy, whether this was with a promise to marry, or was it without a promise to marry, whether it was just, as they call, a fly-by-night affair. So, times have changed. Our society is not static, and law can never be static. That is the most beautiful part about a legal system. That much as though we have the constitution, which is like a solid bedrock to decide the fundamental rights of each human being. And every human being has got a right to dignity, right to privacy, and a right to live the life the way he or she wants. So if a person wants to indulge in sexual activity, before the age of consent or after the age of consent, all these things are very, very private. And the right of privacy, which is also guaranteed under the Constitution, is a fundamental right that also needs to be protected. At the same time, the right that every individual has to his body as well as her body, that also has to be protected. So when a girl says no, we also have the concept of what is called zero tolerance. A girl has the right to say, especially after the Nirbhaya case, we have been using this word zero tolerance very often in various discussions on the media. So whether the sexual activity has actually been done without the consent, with inducement, allurement, with any false promise, how much aware is the girl, particularly the girl aware, and POXO is a gender neutral law. That is the only law that we have in a country which is gender neutral as far as sexual offenses are concerned. So how much aware is the boy about his body being violated, and how much is the girl aware of what she's getting into? So it goes both ways. It is not always that
Right.
a girl can go complaining about rape. It can also be a case where a boy can
It works
complain
both
of rape.
ways is what you're saying.
works both
Well,
ways.
ladies, we're also joined by my colleague Nancy Bora on the studio. She has a question for Miss Khushbu. Nancy, please go ahead.
Ms. Kushba, I actually wanted to ask you, as Ms. Rekha was, she was correctly pointing it out, that it's important to know that victims involved in the case, how much aware are they? Because it's very critical to know that as, as a case is filed, the victims, they tend to change their statements as the trial is going on. First they say that it's consent, then they go around and say no, I was not aware whether it was consensual or not. I mean, when cases like these happens, how can you, as a lawyer also, how can you differentiate, how can you strike a balance? And when you are lowering the age of consent as well, you are putting a 16-year-old on a pedestal to decide, you decide what is right and what is wrong for you. Do you think was it consensual or was it not? I mean, what will go around, what impact will it have on teenagers, and how are you going to strike a balance? How are you going to tell the teenagers that now you have to make a decision, a life or death situation, that was it consensual or was it not? Whether they are not aware about it, how do you raise that awareness and how do you strike that balance? Ms. Khushbu, please go ahead.
See, the age of 16 or 18 also, for that matter, the aspect of consent comes with a lot of complexity, whether it's a free and it's a willful consent. Now that free consent also talks about the aspect where whether you're aware about the contours of everything when you're giving a consent. So whether you've seen the world in a manner. So I absolutely agree with, both the panelists when they're talking about that there are cases where there's a 19-year-old boy and 17-year-old girl, there is a romance, and after that parents go on filing or they go on filing later. But there are instances where there is 30-year-old men and 16-year-old girl, or vice versa, or whatever the scenario would be. And the kind of consent, the consent must have been in a manner where they have been lured to give consent. They have been shown the world or the promises which practically they at that age are not able to understand or fathom whether they are real or they are not. And in that scenario, if they give a consent, so there are a lot of scenarios, and we can't just close eyes or can have a straight answer to it that okay, let's lower the age, because there have been a lot of cases which have been coming in. Cases have been coming whenever any law comes. Pick up any law, there have been misuse of it, but we have to understand how do we implement that law. Are there any changes that we can bring in to modify, to give it more explanation to it, so that that law is being applied or is being utilized by the victim or the actual victim of the cases. Now coming directly to your question, the question that comes is, a lot of times they say that okay, it was consensual, then they say okay, we did not know what is consent. That's practically the aspect which I was talking about, that the aspect of consent you don't understand. When you say yes, as Rekha ji was talking about, you sometimes say yes when somebody has promised marriage or shown you the world which you don't know. So whether that was a free consent, that consent is based on something, the world which is being shown to you. Sometimes they show you the environment that this is how it is, and you're not in that prudent age. That's why we talk about that these are minors, they can't take decisions. And why are we going on decreasing? We need to understand that what exactly are the lacunas, and how do we address those lacunas or those challenges that are coming in implementation of this law, or a misuse of this law that has been coming in. But not going away with, or going away with the whole concept of, okay, let's go away with the 18-year, let's decrease the age to age 16, and just because there are few which have been going. I'm not saying nobody should be falsely been implicated in the court, but that challenge is something which has to be addressed in a different manner, not in this manner, is what I would say.
Right. Well, Ms. Shankar, I'd come to you. If the age of consent is lowered to 16, first of all, you did not seem to be, you don't seem to agree with what Ms. Khushbu has to say, but we'll come to that later. I'd like to ask you that if at all the age of consent is lowered to 16, how do you think India would fare into this?
My goodness, that's a big question. No, actually, I think my stance from the beginning has been 16 is not, see, how do you decide on an age? Again, that is what the entire exercise has been about. But we can take 17 as a safer age just because that is a milestone age for at least women who seem to be most of the victims. The majority victims are girl children, and you expect that they would have at least completed 10th grade by 17. That's why 17 is a better number, one feels. But coming to your point of if the age is lowered, how will India fare? My dear, I don't think the sexual realities of India are going to change very much differently, are going to change drastically because we changed the age of consent by 2 years. It was, in fact, if you remember, it was 16, then it was increased to 18 so that there is no difference between the age of marriage and the age of consent. And now they're trying to roll it back to 16, taking into account how India is already faring, taking into account the realities of Indian society, taking into account the fact that in rural cultures, 16 is considered a legitimate age to marry a girl of consent. It's reality. 16 is not considered childhood traditionally in most cultures in India, especially perhaps in the urban scenario where education and emancipation play a much bigger role in the lifestyles of women. And I talk particularly about women because, like it or not, we can, most of the victims who are covered and who are saved even by POCSO, who are benefited by POCSO are girl children. So let's talk about the girl child. India is going to not fare very differently because girl children are being denied access to education at a very early age. They are being denied access to health and nutrition at a very early age. And they were being denied access to a fair legal process at a very early age. And that's where POCSO was very beneficial to them. So lowering the age of consent is actually to recognize that people above the age of 16 are capable of having a sexual life without legal prosecution on them. That's about it. We don't want to criminalize genuine people in love or genuine people just exploring their sexuality, which is a ground reality. We don't want to criminalize two adolescents who are in a relationship. We don't want to criminalize a minor boy for being in a relationship with a minor girl. That's what this is about. This is why I too agree with Rekha ji I too said the same. I too echoed the same sentiment when I said age of consent itself shouldn't be a fixed definition. It should be on a, it can be a number, but that should just be a guideline. But it should actually be a case to case basis where you look at each person's capability, maturity, financial position, educational background. You can't just say consent is automatic because you had a birthday. It has to take
Right.
into account the entire situation of the person involved. So it has to be
Well,
a
on that
case-to-case
note,
basis.
I'd like to go to Ms. Khushbu and ask her that, does lowering the age of consent really improve gender justice? I'd really like you to answer this, Ms. Khushbu. Over to you, please.
Not exactly how. I mean, this is the gender neutral law. I mean, how is it's gonna do any how is it's gonna solve? I'm not able to understand, or maybe I'm not able to understand.
You can always no because you can accuse a person who was in a consensual relationship of rape.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Can you repeat once more?
You can accuse a person who was in a consensual relationship. Several years after that relationship broke down, you can go back and accuse that person of rape.
See, things have to be not taken in a nutshell. You can accuse, but there has to be facts. Every matter is not just a pure law. There are facts involved in each case, and that's where we
Exactly,
have.
ma'am.
That's
exactly. That is why we have.
That's why we have evidences. That's why we have. No, let me finish it off. That's why we have evidence in place, and after that entire process that goes on is where the judgment comes. It's not that there is a law and something like that has happened and he's just put behind the bar, and that's where the judgment just instantly comes. That okay, he has
Unfortunately, with FOCSO, as you very well know, the presumption of guilt is reversed.
19. So all I'm saying is a 16-year with a 16-year or 16-year with a minor. That's not what I'm addressing here. I'm addressing that a person at that age, and there have been lot of research that has gone through to understand that 18 is the age where you can't have prudent way to take decisions in life, or maybe your body doesn't come in that manner. I don't know how you come with the number of 17. I think 19 seems to be a better number if we're really talking about age and how consent can go on. But I absolutely agree the cases where it has been misused by the parents, where two minors or maybe somebody with a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old daughter, and they are not happy with that relationship, go on filing cases. That's where I think things have to be taken up in a different manner, and that's where I think some more judgments or clarifications have to be looked into. But not the part that you just go away with the aspect that okay, let's lower the age, and let's continue, because we can't close eyes on the aspect that how people who are not prudently in a state to take decisions are manipulated, are being put to the side. And tomorrow if some case comes and you says okay, this is not, we have to, there is no law in that manner, we'll be in a state which is doom stage. Same comes with the domestic violence, same comes with rape when it comes to normal, same comes with stalking. Every law has been misused, but we have to understand how do we implement so that it doesn't come to a misuse part, nothing else. You can't let go close of the eyes because there are 10 cases which have been misused using that law.
Yes, Ms. Rekha, please.
No, we are not.
No, beg your pardon. Yes, Ms. Kasturi, please.
Yes. This is not about.
I actually agree with you. I'm not saying I'm against you. I partially agree with you, but there's a portion of it. I think that's where I don't agree with letting go of the law or lowering the age.
Right. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that I am not basing my support for this on the basis of exceptions to the rule. I'm not talking about the outliers that are, could be genuine cases, and we are not talking just about abuse of the law. I'm talking about social reality. I think it is necessary to understand and respect the fact that adolescents are capable of consent. Khushbuji thinks that 19 even, you need a college education to be able to distinguish between consensual and non-consensual and willful consensual sex. I don't think that is the case. I think even you can be a minor, but you can still be capable of feelings. which are not necessarily coerced at all times. And I think that is the ground reality. And this is not, I speak for a lot of people. It's not just me. I'm not just saying this is not my personal opinion. I think that is the logic. I think that is the kind of input that the exercise is being taken on the grounds of as well. The law panel discussing this age reversal or lowering of age is taking into consideration that people above a certain age, while still needing the protection of law in many respects, are still capable of entering into consensual sexual relationships. It may not be something that we want to agree as a sanskari society, but that is actually more, I think it's just practical and more respectful to adolescents as an important part of society, to give them a little bit of right to consent.
Well, Miss Khushbu, you were correctly pointing it out that the Sanskari society, there are a lot of taboos that goes around when you say that a teenager is able to make decision whether she wants to indulge in a sexual relationship with a guy or anybody. But I just couldn't hold myself. I just want to bring in this perspective. It's a very personal opinion of mine. Whenever you're talking about, whenever when this debate around the age, the ideal age, first it was, 16 is the ideal age for somebody who took the age of consent. Then we have age of marriage, that is 18. Then the government is trying to raise it up to 21. Then we have age of, to vote. I can vote at the age of 18. I just want to think that, as a society, we have changed so much. At the age of my mother, at the age of 16, it would be so different than I was at the age of 16. I mean, it would be a day-night difference. But I think that the law, the committees, they really need to look back and understand that as a woman, I feel so, tied up and limited that somebody is telling me that your ideal age to vote is 18, your ideal age to get married is 18, your ideal age to get married should be 21, your ideal age of consent should be 16. I mean, why are these people telling me what is my age? I mean, does it not, and Ms. Rekha, I want your opinion on it. As an advocate, do you think, does it not, hamper my right of that comes under Article 14? Like, I am allowed to have, if I want to get married at the age of 18 and if they legalize it to 21, what am I supposed to do? If my age of consent, if at an age of 14, I want to indulge in a sexual relationship, but it is not legal for me to do it. And it's just not as a woman, but as a teenager also, what is my right to life? Where is my right to equality? Where is my right to voice? My freedom of expression. I mean, it is being snatched away from me, and there is this ideal age, this concept of sanskari society that we are putting ages, that this is the maryadas, this is the right age, this is not the right age. I mean, how does somebody justify this? I mean, the debate is that, the POXO Act and everything we are talking about is correct.
Right.
But the legal aspect to it, how is it fair?
See, whether it is fair or not, the benchmark, there is no benchmark for that whether this is fair or this is unfair. As I was just talking in my earlier, answer which I made, that we have the constitution, the foundation of all the laws which are enacted, over the years, and various statutes that are there, they all stem from the Constitution of India. The Constitution guarantees you, Article 14 guarantees you equality. Article 21 gives you the right to live the life that you want in the manner that you want, as long as you do not violate the rights of any other person. Having said that, I think that much as you have a right to, indulge into a sexual activity as an adolescent, if you want to, and without any inducement, without any pressure, of being a sanskari or a non-sanskari, or even nowadays, the way it is like, if you're not probably indulging into a sexual activity, somebody might even turn around and say that you are a prude. I mean, there is so much of, trend to kind of keep up with the times, that you're old fashioned and you're a prude if you're not indulging into it. What are you keeping and especially girls are told that, what are you keeping your virginity for? To keep it as a treasure for your husband when you get married, So those kind of things which are there, which are part of a social tradition, and a religious tradition to some extent, All those things are there. But at the same time, keeping all those things in mind also, when Baba Ambedkar laid down the foundation of a constitution, these fundamental rights were guaranteed. So the only thing that one can say in such a situation is that there cannot be such and such things which is right and such thing is wrong. A balance has to be drawn. To each his own. That is what the only thing I can say, to each his own. You want to indulge into a sexual activity at the age of 14 or 16 or 18, there is nobody who can stop you from doing so. But then you do not have a right to complain about it. Like if you want to sleep around with somebody at the age of 14 or 16 or 18 or 19, then don't go on screen, running to the court and say, oh, I was duped into it, I was misled into it, I did not even know what is the meaning, as Pushpuji talked about, what is the meaning of consent. So I do appreciate your point that, why should anybody be dictating to me that, you cannot get married before this age, you cannot have sex with a man before this age, you cannot vote before this age. Yes, certain, we are a part of a civil society. So probably I would say that to keep some kind of, checks and balance, a system of checks and balance has to be drawn. That is all that the government can do, so that we have at least some.
Well, Rekha ji, I'm sorry to
benchmark
interrupt,
that
but what
whether you
Nancy,
qualify or not.
Rekha ji, what Nancy really wanted to ask is that, in India, like you rightly mentioned, we are supposed to vote at the age of 18, get married at the age of 18, well, for women and 21 for men. How are we even thinking of lowering the age of consent to 16? Isn't this hypocritical?
If you think about it, you said... Yeah, please go on.
I would say that lowering the age, is it for me or for...
yeah, it's for you, ma'am. Please go on.
Yeah. I said that, personally speaking, I think that lowering the age, is not really the correct thing to be done, especially because whether we like it or not, much as we talk about equality and, things like that, let us also accept the fact that ultimately it is a hard fact, a hard reality, that it is very, very often that more than 50%, I would say, talking about statistics, it is the women, it is the girls, who are kind of the victims of sexual violence, by men. So I think that it is correct that you cannot vote before the age of 18. And a man cannot marry before the age of 21, but a girl can marry at the age of 18. So I think that it does sound hypocritical at to some point. So therefore, that is why the need of the hour is probably the uniform civil code. And if the uniform civil code is there, then probably the age of marriage for both boys and girls might also become equal. So when we're talking about the age of consent, there is no difference. As far as age of consent for a boy or a girl is concerned, there is no difference, right? But for marriage, there is a difference that a girl cannot get married before the age of 18 and a man cannot get married before the age of 21, legally speaking. Though, of course, very often, especially the rural sectors, girls are married off at the age of 16, as Khushbuji also talked about, as Khushbuji was mentioning that very often in the rural sector, 16 is supposed to be the done age for getting married. And in fact, even our Hindi films have kind of glamorized the whole concept of being a 16 saal ki ladki, So I think that the reality is that things are happening the way they should not be happening, but some standard has to be drawn. There has to be what we call the touchstone. There has to be a touchstone, and that is why it may sound hypocritical to some extent that you cannot, get married before such and such age. You cannot have sexual relationship before such and such age, and you cannot give consent before such and such age. But a balance has to be drawn. Otherwise, there would be complete anarchy in society.
All right.
So I think the only way to keep to keep some level, some semblance of a rule of law, certain laws have to be laid down that yes, as regarding age, even though it may seem to violate your fundamental right to live the life that you want.
Shankar, I'd come to you on that note. We've seen a massive shift in the behavioral pattern of adolescents, particularly in this, connected generation. Now, the question is that does age of consent really matter to them?
I'd like to point out here something that Rekha ji, I think she was trying to express it, but I think I can put it in more succinct words. In the matter of having sexual relationships, in the matter of having sexual activity, the law, the Indian legal system does not proclaim that having sex itself per se is illegal under a certain age and you have to wait till a certain age to be able to have sexual activity at all. That is not the case. What we are talking about when we say age of consent is that you have the protection of the law. You are treated as a child until the age of consent. That's what age of consent means. The age of consent means that the law assumes that today, as the law stands, today, as the POCSO law stands, a minor is incapable of giving consent at all. Any sexual activity that a minor engages in is considered rape at the hand of the other person, regardless of the age of the other person. It depends on who decides who is the victim, right? So the legal protection is available to minors because society considers it its responsibility to take care of its young ones. We all need to take care of our children. So who is a child is defined very clearly under the POCSO law. So till today, POCSO law defined children as those who have not attained adulthood, and adulthood is 18, not the person that attains puberty, but a person who attains some kind of mental capacity where they're able to even get married, where they're able to vote. So that's where the magic number of 18 came from. This is a direct answer to Nancy, who kept saying, why is everything defined by an age? That's what we've decided as a society is a acceptable age to do a lot of things, to enter into contracts, to not just to vote, to enter into legal contracts. That's also age. The age is majority. Majority is considered the age where you can take decisions on your own. Giving sexual consent is treated a little differently. Giving cognizance to ground realities, and we cannot deny adolescents their right to be adolescent. So that is why we take into account puberty instead of majority, and that is why this entire age of consent debate has come up. I wanted to clarify that. So now to your point of what exactly was your question about rural backgrounds, I think?
No, my question was that does age of consent really even matter to them, given, the kind of, given that the shift in behavioral patterns of adolescents, particularly in this connecting.
Never mind POCSO. POCSO is about protection to children, but age of consent definitely matters just as much as age of marriage, and age of majority has had an impact on society as a whole. We had child marriages in India, and there has to be a law that says this is the age at which we will consider marriages valid. This is the age at which we will consider sexual activity protectable and something that we can go to court for justice for. We do need that, because otherwise we are going to see mayhem. This is a land which had child marriage was the rule, was the norm. So, your grandmother and my grandmother, they were probably married off at 14 and had about 8 children. I mean, in a country where population control is tied to women's marriageable age, in a country where women's rights are tied into what she does. I mean, today women are experiencing a renaissance, freedom for education, for power, for job opportunity, everything, for health. The kind of deaths that were happening at childbirth because the girl is too young.
Young, definitely.
To be giving birth to all those children. Age of majority.
Well, I think we lost Ms. Jain. Let me just move on quickly to Ms. Rekha. I was just reading about this whole, what is going on, how is the implementation if we lower the age of consent. I was reading about it, and there are a lot of minor girls, especially at the age of 17 and 18 or 16. They are indulged in commercial sex activities, and doing something in a vulnerable situation does not, because there is lack of choices, should not be accounted as consent. But if we lower the age to 16, and then you cannot convict them cases, we cannot raise question to that why were you indulged in the sex activities, because then it comes down to that there was money exchange, so your consent was there. So I mean, when it comes to cases like this, I mean, do you think that lowering the age of consent is going to be, it's going to backlash on the women empowerment? Again, it's going to hinder the rights of women as well.
I really appreciate the way you're looking at this problem. That's a new angle which I never thought of, frankly speaking. Much, of course, prostitution, as they say, is one of the oldest businesses which are flourishing, in the world at large. And in our country, it is illegal. So whether you are a minor or whether you're a major, it is considered to be illegal. It is not a form, it is not a permissible way of earning your livelihood. However, very often we hear about raids which are taking place, in these prostitution so-called dens, and we even hear about cases that, a minor girl has been rescued, or a minor girl was being sold off for a certain price, by her parents or by, some person who was, professing to get her a job in the city and things like that. So the ground reality is, statistics show that these prostitution centers are, it will not be an exaggeration to say that even today there would be a number of girls who are below the age of 18, and as Ms. Shankar talked about the age of puberty. So the moment the puberty takes place, the girls are kind of pushed into this world's oldest profession of prostitution.
Ma'am, my apologies. I'll have to cut you short because we're short on time. I'll quickly take in Ms. Khushbu. Ma'am, my last question to you would be, please try to just wrap it up in like 30 seconds or so. How do we go upon implementing it, if at all? Will it not clash with the personal law?
Not exactly clash with the personal law, but I would say this is a complex issue, cannot be a straight answer to it.
Right.
But we have to look into the scenario as to use cases and maybe come up with something as a solution so that it's not being misused by people and it is being utilized for the purpose for it is meant for.
Right. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us on this special show. With that, it's a wrap on today's special edition of News 9. Keep watching News 9 for further updates. Have a lovely day ahead.
Mr. Murthy, 25% of our population is below the age of 15. How do we make them involved in this growth story?
The leadership at all levels, in the country, they have to embrace good values, but it'll still take some time.
I think we are not nurturing and leveraging 50% of our strength, which are the women.
Yeah, one of them has to step down and do that.
If you had donned the seat of chairman, maybe by now Oxford or Cambridge would have had chairwoman as a legitimate English word.
Duologue with Barun Das, featuring N.R. Narayanamurthy and Sudha Murthy. World premiere on Connected TV. Tonight at 10. Only on News9 Live, India's first and only digital exclusive English news stream for Connected TV. Supported by Alliance Broadband.
With all this gear, you must be wondering if I'm climbing a mountain. Well, let me give you a wider look of this place. This is Asia's largest mountain of shame.
A mountain of waste, almost the height of the Qutub Minar.
When you enter capital cities of some of the biggest countries in the world, you don't have 3 garbage mountains waiting to welcome you, depending on whichever side of the city you enter from.
The thing is that a lot of times we talk about landfills only when there's a fire at the landfill. You need to understand that a landfill is at fire almost throughout the year. It's only when the firefighters are not able to douse the fire is when it actually catches the nation's attention, the city's attention, or media attention.
The towering landfills worsen one of Delhi's biggest problems: pollution.
यहाँ पर आप रात को आओ, दिन में आओ, आप 1 घंटे बैठ नहीं सकते बाहर। इतनी धूल, प्रदूषण, महक, आप खाना भी नहीं खा सकते बाहर बैठ के।
Life around the landfill is a curse.
हमारे घर में जो बड़े हैं उन्हें अस्थमा के वो पेशेंट है, आए दिन उनको नेबुलाइजर लगाना पड़ता है।
डॉक्टर ने मुझे ये चीज बोला कि यहाँ का एरिया छोड़ के कहीं और चाहिए।
Delhi's garbage mountains are now a fetid symbol of the national capital's trash problem. The question is, who is to be blamed? Watch Delhi's Garbage Mountains. Streaming on News9 Plus for the Genflix.
इंजीनियरिंग कर रहे हैं क्योंकि सभी लोग कर रहे हैं।
Coaching is now starting from grade 3, 4, 5, 6.
कोटा जाने वाली बीच राह में आधे टेस्ट देके हैं सिलेक्शन की चाह में।
ऑल इंडिया का बच्चा कोटा जाता है।
This rat race is for rats, not for humans. So why should we even be a part of it?
The Rat Race. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
कृपया ध्यान
Hi, Mom.
Hi, have you managed to catch the train or no?
Yeah, I got the train.
Are you sure you're on a train? This looks like a flight.
No, Mom, I'm not traveling by a flight. I'm traveling by the Vande Bharat.